Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show in episode 145. I am your host, TJ. I don't really, that's kind of like my stage name, I guess. I don't really have one. There is no, Eminem or, well, I can't say Beyonce because Beyonce is her first name. But, yeah, I don't have any name that just kind of, it's like my moniker or some sort of stage name. This is just it, guys. If you have one, write in and tell me what would be good. I'll go for it I'll go with it for a week, if I like it. Well, Bullet, he's contributing to the intro. There you go. He didn't contribute to the outro, so we'll contribute to the intro. But yes, let's get into this, guys, and let's welcome our next guest. Okay, people, we are back. I always tell you where I find them. Podmatch, of course. But just talking to her here, she's a really sweet woman, and she's lived quite a life for someone her age already, and she's just very impactful, and she has a story connected to her child. And of course, I wanted to get her on the show and just discuss many things with her and get close to her. So you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Nicole Smith. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm married to a lovely man by the name of Kyle, and I have two beautiful daughters. Both one is 7 and one is 2. One is a little more atypical path, one a little less so. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me on the surface level.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we should kind of delve into a little bit about what you've gone through in life before we get to your daughter, because I know you've had quite some adventures out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So actually, I have a master's in law and public policy, and little did I expect I would get on the communication side of human rights on the global scale. I carried a lot of different types of cases, everything from the child bride of Uganda. I would run a lot of cases advocating to free imprisoned minorities overseas, Iran, Sudan, Turkey, and beyond. So I had a pretty wild adventure of a career doing some pretty crazy things, yeah.
Now, again, because we all want to, I mean, or at least at some point in our lives, like, we want to do something to impact and be good. And, of course, life takes us in different directions and whatever. But was there something as a kid or a teenager or something like that you just were interested in helping people with human rights? Like, what was the passion behind it?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. My parents, my dad is an entrepreneur by trade, but they actually dealt with at-risk youth in the home just as a form of volunteer and service to God is the way they viewed it. So my childhood was very full of service. My mom was a juvenile detention center counselor for young girls. So at a very early age, it was sort of instilled in myself, my brother, that a life of fulfillment is the one that is full of service. So I think just having that as a part of my everyday life growing up was played a very integral part in what I would do as a career on my career path. Now, obviously I didn't really expect it quite to go the direction it did, but I guess I couldn't see myself being anything but having service as a part of what I did in a career path.
Sure. No, it's good. I mean, it didn't seem like it was forced on you. It just was something that kind of came natural. But that's I think that's why people don't understand like how real important it is to have at least one good parent in the household. But if you have two, it's much better because, me and my mom have been really close, but, me and my father aren't on that level. We are friends, but we had to get to a place where we could become friends much later. And
you know, there's only so much the mom and there's only so much the dad can teach the person.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I've always believed that I had a deep privilege and that I had not only two parents in the home, because you can have two parents in the home and still not have the level of provision you need. I had two parents that were deeply involved in fostering not just a physical provision, but also emotional, intellectual, and spiritual provision. And so I do feel as if I did have a very good childhood for that reason, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it also kind of shows what you've become and what you end up having to be for your own children.
Yeah.
To be a good representation, because I always kind of go back to this thing where it's like, as a person with a disability, you know, you go through bullying, and some of us do. We go through bullying and get treated poorly, and you always want that one friend that will come sit down with you, even though it like will take a risk for their popularity or whatever. People will look at them like, "Oh, why are you hanging out with the weirdo?" And there are a few people out there that are just wanting to help and wanting to help the less privileged, you know. And it's very kind because, you know, like I said, we all kind of at some point want to help others.
Yeah, and to be seen and to feel seen. I was actually in special education as a kid, oddly enough, especially odd for being that I did end up getting a master's in what I did. But I was bullied as well. And I remember having one of these moments where I had a little girl on the playground that was one of my bullies. She got hurt, and I'm about 5'11", so I've always been bigger. I picked her up and I brought her to the infirmary, the nurse, and she asked me why I was so kind to her when everyone was so mean. And I said, look, you're just supposed to be. Like, that's what you're supposed to be. And those experiences had an integral part to play in who I became, I guess, too, because I felt in those moments as a child unseen, and how deeply impactful those moments can be for the negative too, you know?
Yeah, you can definitely be complicit in going in a different direction and caught up in, you know, the negativity, and because bullying can cause other bullies. You can just grow resentment and hatred to others, and then just go, okay, well, when I become a little stronger, I'll find someone who's a little weaker than me.
It's a feeling of emptiness, and they feel weak too. I don't remember my parents telling me that about the girls that would bully me in school, was that you don't see what's on the other side. They feel empty, they feel weak, and so because of that, they have to feel strong. And this is the only way they know how. So there's an odd sense of awareness that I had in those moments, even though it was difficult.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and a lot of times they don't have the guidance that you had, whether it's the parenting or, you know, there's something there that's lacking, and of course that's why, especially with the climate and the time we're in, it's really important that, you know, teachers and police officers and all these people that are, you know, impacting the youth in their communities, they have to be good, and that's not always the case. And there's so many kids just growing up with just anger, and it's just boiling and boiling, and whether they make it through their childhood or not, obviously some don't because of suicide and violence and other things. The ones who make it through and they never really had guidance, they're just on a rampage, and however they act out in their adulthood, and it never goes away until they deal with it, whether it's counseling or something. But it's a constant buildup. If you don't really address it, it'll always be there. And
you can't ignore it. That's one thing that my parents always did try to instill. If there's something that's there, you must address it, even if it's uncomfortable. You have to go through that process of discomfort over and over and over again to get to a place of peace. Or else, like you said, it'll fester and it will come out eventually.
Yeah. It's if you do, and that's the thing. There's a lot of things that I have been uncomfortable with in the past, and talking about it on here now, it's like nothing. I don't want to say that I've taken the discomfort from it. It doesn't mean that I don't.
Yes.
I still have a feeling like, oh God, like okay, yeah, this bullying and molested and all these things. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
But it doesn't like
There's not that much power. It doesn't have as much power, right?
yeah, and it doesn't drain me as much. Like when I first shared it
Hmm.
on here, I've shared it to a few other people, but when I shared it on here, it was like I had to take them like a week away from the podcast. I mean, I put another one out, but I didn't really want to record that week because I'm just like, oh, like I just feel like shit. I didn't quite enjoy it. And then as I did other people's shows and I did, and obviously doing my own, I just realized like, okay, like this is just, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Just put it out
Yeah.
and just tell your truth. And if people judge, people judge, but people have judged me my whole life anyway.
Yeah.
With my eye condition and other things. So it's like, what's going to be any different? Who gives a shit? Just be yourself.
Yeah.
It's how you grow and evolve and be a better person, and and you just become the better version of you. Because
Yeah, I agree.
for so long, I mean, one of the things that bullying really will teach you is, you know, teach you in a negative way is like you start to hide from who you really are, and you start
Hmm.
to only put out things that other people would like. Someone would
Yeah.
say like, "Oh, I hate this album," and meanwhile it was on my iPod or my CD player at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't tell them that because I don't want them to think I'm whatever. And
Yeah.
and so for so long I just was hiding for who I was because I didn't want people to hit me, or I didn't want people to just dislike me. I wanted to be.
Yeah.
It's not that I wanted to be cool. I just wanted to be not cool. So
Yeah. No, I understand that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the tendency you have when you're a child, and those differences are what ends up making life so rich when you're older and realize that it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But coming to that is difficult when you're a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's something you and I were talking off mic, just taking bad times and bad experiences and trying to turn it into a positive. As a kid,
Yeah.
it's very hard because you're lacking very little knowledge, and there's just your experiences in life. Like anything bad seems like it's the worst case scenario. Now, and sometimes it
Yeah.
is when it's health things or whatever, but sometimes someone just saying you're ugly just seems so destructive that you're melting every time you look yourself in the mirror. Even if you're an attractive person, you just like, oh my God, I'm ugly, and it destroys you, especially
Yeah.
probably if you're a woman and you
Hmm.
see pretty girls and you're like, well, that's not who I am, and you just destroy yourself internally.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true.
Yeah, and it's very hard to just look at the bright side and realize like I'm alive, and
Yeah.
I'm friends with this kid who's in a wheelchair. I'm not in a wheelchair, or this and that, and you can't because you're so focused on yourself, and again, you just don't want to be what I always say is like the person at the bottom of the barrel, because
Yeah.
I've known so many people in the disability community that have put other people with disabilities down. Whether it's a lot of times it's usually the same disability, where it's like if they have some sort of let's say spina bifida, but it's like, oh, you're wearing crutches, like I'm
Yeah.
not. Or in the blind community, it's like, oh, I'm visually impaired, I'm gonna make fun of the blind guy. It's like,
Yeah.
what world are we in? Why are we doing this? Like,
Yeah.
it's just because they don't want to be the worst case scenario. They don't want to be the butt of everyone's joke. It's like,
Yeah.
the blind guy. You're talking about blind people, right? That's not me. That's him over there.
Mhm.
And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't work that way, sir. Your vision is barely better than his. And
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly, he's probably got more independence and is a better person than you just because he's overcome even
It
more.
is kind of a strange sort of part of the human condition. Yeah, to try to maximize and minimize your insecurities. Yeah.
Yeah, and insecurities, they take over, and those voices in the
Mhm.
back of your head will just tell you, like, it'll push you in a direction you don't want to go. I always kind of talk about like the cartoonish angel and devil, and they're just both on your shoulder, and one is overly positive, one is overly negative, and they're both kind of wrong. You kind of have to stay in the middle, and
Mhm.
when you listen to the negative, especially the negative one, it takes you down these really crazy past and you're just mad and angry, and the angel, sets you up for failure a lot of times because it's overly positive, because there is times where you need to be aware and just say no. You can't just say yes to everything, because that's wrong too.
Yeah.
And so, but it takes a lot to figure this out. Like, and that's why it's so interesting to watch people evolve and grow as a child to a teenager to an adult, because you see how life can kick you around. And a lot of times they don't really realize how much life can suck if you allow it to beat you down until they're older and have more life experience.
Yeah. Well, and I think we kind of do a disservice to youth as well. To when you're in that youth stage, there's so much you can't control. And we think that when you get on the other side of that and you can control more of your reality, that life will be better and easier and more joy. But when you get on the other side and you realize how difficult life is, no matter what situation you were born into, wealthy to poor, middle class, whether you're on one side of the earth or the other, we have different experiences in life because of, the reality that's before us. But we kind of get shocked when we're kind of coming into adulthood and realize, oh my gosh, like life is really hard. And sometimes we're not set up with the coping mechanisms we need to sort of guide us towards success, emotional success too.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, obviously you actually becoming a parent, like beforehand, I mean, obviously you were dealing with other less privileged people, but did you have any real experience with cerebral palsy or anybody with disabilities in your life before?
Yes. Yes. So my father's oldest sister has schizophrenia, or at least that's what she's defined as. So she grew up normal by all accounts, maybe a little bit cognitively slow, but nothing out of the ordinary. When schizophrenia is onset at puberty often, and hers also came on with mental impairment. So it reduced her to a mental capacity of like a 4-year-old. Right. So I grew up with her, a beautiful symbol of what human purpose was. She's just a wonderful person, though she's never been able to live on her own. She's totally dependent on my grandparents until they passed away. Now that she lives with my other aunt and lives with my dad on occasion too. So I had a bit of it on a personal level. Throughout the years, I've known many people with disabilities, but there's something different when it's your child. So, I would go back a little bit. My first daughter, I gave birth to her when I was just 3 months short of my 30th birthday. So that was an incredibly empowering experience in and of itself, coming into motherhood. Mm-hmm. I think I sort of bought this understanding what strength was, that culture sort of pushes on us, that masculine strength is just this really powerful thing that you want to seek after. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I gave birth to a daughter, 29-hour labor, no medication, pushed for 15 minutes, broke almost every blood vessel in my face giving birth to her. And on the other side of that was just this really almost like the world of Oz. Everything was black and white. And I was magically transported into Oz, where it was just Technicolor. Parenthood, motherhood was that for me. It was very transformative. Sense of purpose and joy and understanding about the way life was. It was difficult, obviously, because that's what parenthood is. But about a year into my oldest daughter's life, we decided we wanted to have another child. So we thought, well, hey, we had a minute struggle with my first, because, just how it is. But I wasn't prepared for what would happen. In this next phase, about 3 to 4 years long, I experienced an ailment that would cause me an immense amount of pain, that just, I've chronic pain where my mental state was just very altered because I was in a state of pain all the time.
Yeah.
So I sort of was pushed into a medical battle of my own that I never had experienced before. So that was already a first step into an awareness of a new, like, space, I guess. Infertility, I don't know if you have children,
No.
but when you're ready for kids, like, you're ready for kids. And infertility in of itself is mental health challenge. That it puts you in a really negative, terrible, deep, dark hole that you can't imagine. Then you compound that by this really intense physical pain that I could never escape.
Now, what is the thoughts, like the negative thoughts? It's like, what's the direction you're going in? Like, why? What is your brain telling you? Like, you're going to be a bad mother?
So,
like, what is it?
Well, it's more of like, it's okay. So for when you want kids, it's almost like it's a biological urge that sort of overtakes you. And I know my husband experienced this on a very, like, a different level, because men obviously don't physically go through it.
Right.
But it's like all of your hopes and dreams are crammed into one little space. And every single month it's an emotional, like, just, you're on the highest peak and then you're falling off the edge over and over and over again. It's like an emotional suicide every month. It's the craziest thing you'll ever experience, or at least I have, just solely tied to me and what I was experiencing. So, I was already emotionally drained from the physical aspect of just the pain I was going through, but that emotional was just jarring. So I actually got into journaling, and I went back and looked at it, my journaling during those times of just almost like desperation of praying, take this from me, take this from me. Oh my gosh, please take it from me. I need peace. I mean, it was just excruciating.
Is it like, something that you always wanted, and then now that you have it, in this case, you actually don't have it yet, but you have it and it's just super disappointing, and now you're just like, it breaks you in a way, like you're just like, oh, like,
yeah, over and over and over again. And the weird part too was that so you're kind of talking about almost like a comparative game, right? So I have a daughter. Sure. I already have a daughter, and I keep being told over and over again, you just should be grateful you have a child. Well, I didn't realize 25% of infertility are second children, third children, fourth children. It's called secondary infertility. You're going through this, and it felt like every month it was like, I would lose, because eventually it would lead me into a season of miscarriages too, which made it, exponentially worse, because you're losing a child. Yeah. We lost 3 of them. And where I had a small child, and I remember I would lay in the floor in the kitchen, sobbing uncontrollably, feeling like I just lost 2 children, because not only did I lose a baby that was in my womb and I was growing, but I was losing the experiences of joy that I was supposed to have with my other child.
Yeah.
Just deep, dark despair where I would just cry because I couldn't believe that I couldn't feel joy, the type of joy I was supposed to feel with my oldest, because I was so emotionally fixated on the loss that I was getting with infertility, and then the loss of that child, the children I would eventually lose, Yeah. So it was a very difficult time for mental and physical. That would last about 3 years until I got pregnant with my second daughter. Yeah. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
That's a rough patch to go through mentally and physically, but it is something that a lot of people don't get to experience when it comes to when you have something, or just something in life, whether it's a part of your body or whatever, and like you're bedridden and you can't like, just like life, it almost feels like life is just taken from you. And it's really hard to, and again, luckily for you, you came out of it. But for a period of time, you don't understand how depressing it is when you just physically can't get out of bed. And sometimes you go through it for so long that mentally you just get used to it and go, well, why would I get out of bed? I can't anyway. Or even if you could.
You succumb to it.
Yeah, you just like merge with that feeling. And you're now just so destroyed and distraught inside. And like I said, even if you somehow get past the physical ailment of it, the mental part takes over, and it's really, it can be very destructive mentally, and it's almost like, that's why we really devalue, we don't appreciate some of the things in our lives that we do have, just like being able to just go outside and just smell the air and things, because there's times you go through, like there are people go through certain situations and they haven't been outside in weeks. They can't, regardless of whatever their problem is. Obviously, there's people who can't walk and things, but in general, people just don't want to get out of bed, and that's why.
Or find ways in which to seek joy beyond the thing that is imprisoned you in your own mind.
Sure. Yeah.
It's hard to push past those moments. Almost becomes a sense of your identity where you hold it over your head, but almost the world around you tends to, like I said, I'd have people that sort of almost belittled that circumstance I was in because, well, at least you have a child, you should be grateful. I understand, I am grateful. You are, but then you almost belittle that space that you're in, the feeling that you have because, well, you're right. I should feel grateful. And I'd have that feeling very many times over the course of my experience, from the time that the infertility started to, even today. My pregnancy was normal for all intents and purposes. It had its struggles because the infection that I was getting that would cause me to lose the baby, it was hormone responsive. So when I got pregnant again, those hormones sort of brought back the infection, which would make me lose the baby. But her name is Nicole. She was born, obviously, but it was stressful because we were constantly afraid I was going to lose her, just like I had the other 3 children. But I, obviously went to all the way to 37 weeks of pregnancy, and that's when I would go into labor 3 weeks early, and that's when things would diverge from totally normal to not normal.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it had to be at least a relief. I mean, even once you figure out what's going to go, what's to come with her condition and all that, it has to feel like a real relief after it's all over because, you go through 3 straight and nothing. And now you finally have one and she's, maybe not as healthy as you would have liked, but she's alive.
Yeah, we've said that a lot. So how her condition came about, I mean, probably for your audience, they're well aware of what CP is. CP, cerebral palsy, is a neurological disorder that is not a condition of itself. It's usually a byproduct of one. Like if you have a genetic disposition to, say, heart condition, a baby in the womb gets a stroke, they're without oxygen for a certain period of time and they get brain damage, and CP is sort of that product. For my daughter, however, I would go into labor at 37 weeks, 27-hour labor that would result in her having a prolapse cord. A prolapse cord is when the umbilical cord comes out in advance of the baby and it cuts off oxygen flow to the child. And so during that event, with like 10 to 15 minutes of them discovering and getting her out of me, is where she sustained the brain damage from. Yeah. So 100% normal. She has no medical condition that caused it. It was kind of like somebody getting in a car accident. She had an accident, is the way we kind of describe it. Right. So but they didn't really explain this to us during the process. So I didn't have an epidural, so I was put under general anesthesia. My husband wasn't able to be there because she was suffocating to death. So we didn't know anything went wrong at all. They never told us that she had been born not breathing. They never told us that she had been resuscitated. Nothing. We were just starting to see erratic behavior that emerged over the 4 days we were in recovery. And then they sort of just, she wasn't able to self-feed. She looked like she was having seizures. Her eyes would roll back in her head, full wide-eyed. She couldn't suck or swallow. All this sort of stuff was sort of emerging throughout those days in recovery. So we didn't know what happened. Again, they never told us. So they just said, hey, you're going into intensive NICU. We had EEGs. We had all these like series of tests, which were with like neurological, but blood, genetic, infection. They're doing just this whole gauntlet of stuff.
And they didn't do this for your first child?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, because again, it was an event that happened that was an emergency C-section. But it was the weird part of it was they had gone through this whole thing. They never told us that she was resuscitated. That would have been like the key indicator. Hey, she probably has brain damage. But they were doing all these other things throughout the process. We thought, hey, it's probably because they're trying to. It could have been something that was tied to it, also genetics. But they had just gone through all this testing and were like, hey, I remember the moment they told me that she had brain damage. I was almost relieved. It was weird because it'd been so long. We'd been in NICU for a month and we just didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
About what had happened or what was going on. So there was a sort of relief in knowing that it had a name. And then we would go home and she had to have a gastric tube because she couldn't self-feed. So we were sent home with monitors and pumps, and we had all these nutritional guidelines we had to do, and every X amount of hours I had to pump it out of my body. I had to fortify it. I had to pump it back into her body. I would do that for the first year. I don't know how I kind of survived, but she also would stop breathing all the time because that was part of the tone issues. She had muscle tone issues in her throat. So just constantly going through this process of maybe 4 or 5 times a day, she would go completely purple.
Wow.
Just like, bring the breath back into her lungs over and over and over again. And you have to remember too, this is in the height of COVID. She was born in April 2020.
So,
yeah, April 2020. We actually had to go through NICU. I just had a C-section. I had to be in the hospital. I had to actually go totally cold turkey off of any type of pain medication because I didn't want. She was hardly waking up. I didn't want to give any narcotics through my breast milk. So I went totally cold turkey off of like healing from a C-section. I would totally by myself in the hospital, going into shock every night in the middle of the night because my body was just so stressed and overwhelmed. I would just for hours just shake uncontrollably. It's just crazy to have to do this by myself. Yeah. And then going through that process, even when she got home, it got worse because nobody could come and help. Like nobody brought meals, nobody came clean the house, nobody came like they couldn't because that's just the kind of stage we were as a world. It's just wild.
Yeah. And you can't just,
yeah,
and I'm sure you had to watch where you went because I'm sure COVID would not have, well, I mean, I know it wasn't really affecting babies, but I mean, you just never know.
At the time, yeah. Well, that time was definitely very fearful. People were not 100% sure, or at least that's what they were, keep everyone safe. So I think our neighbors, they would help sometimes. And my parents and his parents would come sometimes. But for the most part, they kind of stayed away for fear of making her sick, and she was immunocompromised because of the energy register that it takes when you have CP. Her tone was really tight. So she's always been expending an exorbitant amount of energy just to breathe and exist. So she'd get RSV several times, hospitalized for it. She had a lot of those experiences along the lines too, but it was a very isolating experience because I was there. My husband still had to go work, and just kind of digging into this new experience that the learning curve was really intense. I didn't have really any clue. I mean, you get this idea of what CP is in your head, but CP is so different on a case by case basis.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's nothing to prepare you for it. I mean,
no. Yeah. Like I have a really close friend. She had a CP, but, hers was from strokes, but she never had eating issues. So she didn't even know how to, but my daughter never has had, epilepsy. We found out she wasn't having seizures, thankfully, but it was just these erratic changes in tone that were causing her eyes to roll, and her body would it's so hard to explain. Her body just tensed all the time. It looked like she was almost dancing, because her limbs were just always flailing all the time if she was awake.
Yeah.
So it was just this wild ride of like, okay, this is CP. This is what I know about CP, but my daughter is as unique as everybody else with CP. So I need to learn who she is, and I need to learn the ins and outs of dysphagia, which is the swallowing disorder she has. It's the result of CP for her. And, now she is nonverbal. Even now she's very, very intelligent person. So it's been difficult for her to not be able to speak. So I've had to learn sign language and teach her sign language. That's helped a lot. She still can't walk. She's approaching 3, but we've got a walker and we're moving that direction. It's just these tiny little steps in this journey that have been illuminating, to be sure.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, from where you started there, it was so rocky that even if it still seems bad to most, it's got to seem pretty beautiful. And the fact that you're getting somewhere. Maybe it's taking forever.
Yeah.
You're getting somewhere.
Yeah. I understood the concept of baby steps, where it was, to a traditional family, when their child sits up, that's a milestone. No. There's 100 milestones in between that. For her, she had these like intensive reflexes that would cause her to like slam backwards. So anytime she would do these like neurological impulses, I had to literally guide her body in the correct path every single time she did it, quote, incorrectly, in order to help her accomplish those tiny little micro things, where, like you were saying, I think where you gain a deeper understanding and appreciation for little things. It seems so little. And I'm sure people in the CP community, parents, as well as those that experiencing these things, is that how big those little things are.
Yeah. Now, have they given you any kind of guess, like their own guess, on where she could be in the next 5-10 years, or even the next 2 years? Like, do they feel like she will be verbal at some point?
Yeah. So the interesting thing has been two things. So when she was diagnosed with CP, the doctor had come in, and it was just, she had looked over her MRIs and before having even met her, of course. And she comes in, she's like, okay. It's out of nowhere. We knew CP was a possibility, obviously, but, we just sort of like flew that from our mind. So the first time this physician's like, hey, she's got cerebral palsy. We're like, what? It's kind of a shock, right?
Yeah. Sure.
But she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was like, what? And she said, the child I see in front of me is different than the child I see on the MRI. And I was So even if they said, hey, she's never going to talk, she's never going to walk, she could lose her hearing, she could, whatever. At least I'm seeing something different. The MRI says this is a possibility, but you're doing something right? You guys are working hard, even that young of an age. And as we went through it, they're like, hey, it's looking really possible that she'll talk. It's looking really possible that she'll be able to feed herself. It's looking like it's So they only have estimates in CP world, but yeah, that prognosis is definitely improved a lot from that first. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
No, that's awesome. I hope the best for her. That's awesome. I've asked this to parents who have multiple kids before, one who needs a lot of attention. Have you ever had the talk with your daughter of just about why your other daughter needs so much more attention, just because of jealousy issues, or especially when they're still, what you said she's 7, so I mean.
Yeah, and I actually really appreciate that question, because I've been part of a lot of CP communities that parents are going through this with their kids and they have multiple children, and my oldest daughter really has had a very wide spectrum of response, so she loves her sister. She is incredibly supportive and loving to her, but she has really struggled with the concept of the needs that Cosette has. And sometimes I try to explain, like, hey, my love, she's sick, she needs more help, but most babies do too. You got to understand, like, babies they're pretty intensive, no matter what. But she had gone through, like, last year especially, she choked so often that she started developing a very intense fear of death, because the possibility of death was very prominent part of our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And so we had experiences like where she went to school and some little boy was like, hey, don't touch that because you'll choke and die. And then she's got in a full-blown panic attack, crying uncontrollably, won't speak to anybody. And we finally kind of get to the bottom of it, and we're like, hey, sweetheart, he didn't know, it's okay. It really will, kind of having to guide her through those moments of those fears bubbling to the top, and just sitting down and giving her a hug and telling her how much we love her, and how much God loves her and how important she is to us, apart even from her sister. Like, we're here for her. It's been a challenge.
Yeah, because I'm sure on the outside, to her, at some point, it may look like you guys love your other daughter more because you're spending so much time, and it's not the case. It's just she doesn't need that kind of help right now.
Yeah, and I try to explain too often, like, hey, love, you went through this as well. Like, some of the realities are just the same between their babyhood, like that are relatable. Maybe I have to buy some more things for her. That's hard for her to understand. No, I had, every time you got to that new size, I bought you all new clothes too. But you're growing slower now. You don't have to have new clothes as often. But she sort of translates that differently, like, you love her more because you're buying her more stuff. No, it's pretty much the same, but you just don't remember going through that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of just guiding her through an emotional process, and I call them opportunities for grief. Like, I want to encourage anybody else that goes through this. When you get to a point in which you're just deeply overwhelmed and you're just sink into that sadness. I know it sounds pretty different advice, I guess, but I mean, not to give away to it, but to don't let it kind of like stuff away. You want to be able to embrace it for what it is right now, because every time you sort of sink into it and go, okay, this hurts so bad, let your mind roll over why and allow it to the grieving process to happen, because as a parent going through this, it is grieving. You're grieving the loss of an ideal, especially when you've gone through infertility. You want this baby so bad, and you get this baby, and this baby has disabilities. And she didn't meet my expectations, right? But she did. She's alive. She's here. She's present. And no, it didn't look exactly the way it is, the way I expected. But she's alive. She is. And that's something to find joy in. But allow yourself to have those feelings, because I was quote encouraged by this poem. And I don't know if you've heard this poem before, but it's this idea of, there's a poem about giving birth to a child with disabilities is like planning a trip to France, but you end up landing in Denmark. Have you heard this poem before?
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was spoken over to me so many times that it was almost like I'm exhausted by it. Please don't tell me this again. But yeah, essentially the idea is like, you're planning up all these expectations about how beautiful and wonderful France is. France has this unique beauty and culture and pace that is what you desire. But when you get on this plane and you land in a different country with a different beauty and a different language and a different culture and a different pace, you have to just acclimate to, you're still in a beautiful place. You're still in a beautiful culture, and it's just different.
Yeah.
And I had to grieve through not landing in France, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Allow yourself to go through that grieving process, because your expectations are not being met. But if you just allow yourself to sink into the beauty of this new space, you really can feel so much joy. And maybe it doesn't feel like it right now, but it will. It really will. I can't tell you the amount of joy that Cosette has brought us. The lows have been really low, but man, the highs have been so high that I just couldn't imagine like life without her being there, because she could have died that day very easily, and I could have had to bury a daughter, but instead of I got a daughter that I can love and to nurture and find joy in a different way than my other daughter too, which you do with any of your kids. But the experience is definitely different when you have kids with disabilities. So
yeah, I guess it would be like if you were on just like a really rocky flight and you were crashing to your death and you survived, but you lost your luggage. But you're like, shit, I don't care. Yeah. Like, I'm alive. Like, you're appreciating everything that you just went through, and you're able to just be a whole different person and just enjoy who you are and enjoy your situation.
Yeah.
But it's like, I lost my favorite pants. Oh, well.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Well, and it's a deeper sense of purpose. Like, I have a really close friend that their daughter ended up with a much more severe case of CP than Cosette ended up with. They talk about that too. Their journey has been just an awareness of how deep those feelings are. We've got the lowest lows in this life as parents with a child with disabilities. Our highs are so high because we understand that our daughter has a deeper purpose in and of what she produces. She may never walk or never speak or never eat independently, but man, she's beautiful and special and wonderful because she is. And Cosette gave that sense of purpose to us, that a deeper richness to our life that's just beautiful. And again, like I kind of experienced that, but when it's your kid, I'm sure your mom was like that, and mom was like that too, just sink into those feelings and just revel in that you get to feel them at all. Because I've walked through experiences with friends that had to bury their babies.
Sure, yeah.
Oh,
and it seemed like she was probably close to, joining the other three as well. I mean, same with me. Like I was supposed to die. I was 4, so I was born. But yeah, and that's, you grow an attachment, especially the mother. Because,
oh gosh, yeah.
Because we come out of you, and yeah, you can't dwell in all that. You have to, like, her and I have a good bond and everything, because she stayed in the hospital 4.5 months of me when I was dying, and my skin came off, and everything that happened to me. And it's kind of like with you, it's just, we came out of it with, I was still on feeding tubes, and I'm now legally blind, but it's like, where I was, I didn't have skin, I didn't have hair, and all these things, all that came back. It just, now my eyes are worse. And yeah, you just can't be counterintuitive. You have to really, in a way, kind of be advantageous, and take the situation you have, and make it the best you can. You can't just
and learn how to find joy in it.
Sure. Yeah.
I know that's the hard part. There really is something on the other side.
Yeah. Well, that's the mental health part of it too. That's where, when you're in such bad places, and this can go for the person who's going through the problem, or the parent. If you're going through such bad grief and just depression, and it's overtaking you, it's really hard to see that little glimpse of light. But if you can see it, that means there's something. And if you can just continue to kind of pull yourself, like grab the rope and continue to pull, the light gets a little brighter, and you just keep going, even if it takes forever. Sometimes maybe you fall back a little bit, and you just got to grab onto the rope again and pull up. But you're gonna have setbacks.
You're gonna have setbacks. That's true.
You're gonna have relapses, but you just keep going, and it's I mean, I say this for myself currently. I say this for anybody. We all go through issues, and it's really hard to look at the brighter side of everything when you've been through a lot of hell. And when you go through more and more through life, it's really hard to look at the positives, because you're always looking over your shoulder, like, when is the next thing coming? But it doesn't mean it's coming. And if you do dwell in it so much, it's almost like when something does happen, it's just like, see, I told you. And you spent so much time looking for it that you don't even really know how much time had passed, that really maybe years went by that you could have enjoyed, but you were just constantly looking for that negative thing to come, and you didn't enjoy the life that you had at that point. And I was talking to somebody last night just about enjoying your good days. In her case, physically, just in mind with my vision or mental health, enjoy those good days, because when we're in those, like, that dark smog of our depression, and we're dealing with our physical ailments, we tend to sit there and dwell on the things we didn't do in life, even if it's little minute basic things like I didn't wash the dishes. We tend to hone on that and go, oh man, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, when you have a good day, don't waste it, because sometimes it's far in between. And when you have a good day, just do the things you didn't want to do. And if it's like, oh, I want to, I want to do more information on what I have, I need to do some research. Well, you're having a good day, do it now, because the next time you're in some physical pain or whatever, you're going to just go, shit, I should have done that. Yeah. Everybody deals with their pain differently.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong answer, really. I mean, there is some wrong answers, sure, and there's some right answers, but people go through it differently. Everyone's going through different issues. I mean, that's why it's so hard to kind of bring, one of my big goals is to just do my part. I'm bringing the disability community together, but it's so hard because there's so many different variants of us, and we all deal with our issues differently. And
all the issues are differently, and you're a different part of the process too. That I know that my daughter is very young. I'll get to hear her end of the story, many years as she walks this out. I'm not going anywhere, right? But everybody has a different variation of it too, and you're just playing a different part as well. So thank you for bringing awareness. So it is very important.
Just trying to do my little part.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, it is very lonely as a parent. I know you didn't walk that out, not the same way that your mom did, but it is a hard path to be on, especially when you feel alone.
Yeah, for sure. So. I mean, even if you have your husband and so on, and your daughter and all. But yeah, it's
Well, and I've talked to my husband about this many times. I said, we were on the same path. We're in the same parallel path. We didn't experience the same journey though.
yeah.
Because I was her day-to-day caregiver. I was the one that was like physically guiding her body every inch that she earned. We earned it together, kind of thing. But I also didn't know what he felt like, feeling powerless to watch his wife be rolled away,
Mm-hmm.
wife and daughter be rolled away in the emergency room. And, it took a couple months almost for us to emotionally be able to stop and go, hey, by the way, like, what did you go through? Like when I was rolled away to the OR, did anybody come talk to you? Like,
Right.
What were your experiences that day? And, the times that we've had to, sort of navigate this during COVID. And he's not allowed to be a part of any of the doctor's appointments. He's not allowed to be a part of literally any part of this process. I had to do it on my own. How has it felt? What have you gone through throughout this as well?
Yeah.
It's been interesting for us to both sort of come to terms with the own journey we were both on, which we both felt powerless for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, as a man who's supposed to be "quote unquote" the protector, and they're
We
all
couldn't
leaving,
protect.
and there's no maybe he has less attachment now. He's detached from the daughter because she can't be around him, and and then maybe neglect because everybody has needs and affection and all these things, and it's like, man, I can't even just like be with my wife. I can't be with my daughter. It's yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
different.
and he it is, and he experienced an immense amount of, I guess, fear because my husband's an engineer. He likes to be able to know all the variables,
Right.
and for him, he kept saying, basically like, what if? And I'm like, well, what if? Not that it. We have a 2-story house, right? So what if she can't walk? Okay, well, let's just like regroup for a while. We don't know whether she'll be able to walk or not. But he was like ready to sell the house immediately upon diagnosis. He's like, we're selling a house. You're going to get a 1-story house. But that's the type of person he is. He wants to fix it. He wants to make it better, but he sort of felt powerless to a process that was beyond us. It's true. We can't control outcomes. We can just do our best with what the next step, right? Next best step ahead of us. So yeah, it's been interesting experience to sort of see how both of us reacted to parenthood, our different roles in Cosette's story.
Yeah, it doesn't matter as long as you're still together and still doing. You're both dedicated, and I mean, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
terrific. I didn't ask you beforehand, but do you have anything to promote?
Oh yeah. Well, one big part of our story, I think probably you're aware of, but I did start a nonprofit with the intention of teaching about the inherent dignity of the human person, because that was a big part of that journey of really just reinforcing that every single person on planet Earth is in possession of an inherent dignity and inherent value that is worthy of our protection. A lot of my human rights work, that was a big part of, just a reality that I faced where, everybody is, all these cultures are measuring dignity by different values, rather than everybody being equal. They're saying, well, hey, I can enslave you based off of your religious association, or and Cosette having a disability, that's another way of saying, hey, you don't have as much value as I do because I'm normally able. So this nonprofit sort of came out of that ambition and that drive to make sure everybody understood that they were loved. The name of that nonprofit is dignitydefense.org. If you can go and find out more about our mission. And then we also have a podcast called Pro Dignity No Doubt as well.
What's the what's the subject matter of your podcast? Like, what's the
that's basically, it's very similar to what yours is actually, which I was very happy when we got connected. We like to tell stories very similar to what you're doing with yours as well. People that have gone through really difficult times, sex slavery, conception and rape, adoption, addiction, those sorts of things. And we just really just dive into those stories, and we try to tell people they're not alone.
Sure.
Just like what you're doing, but also to make sure that they know that they are valuable. They are loved, and despite what some cultures may say,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll whore myself out. If you ever need a guest or need anything, just let me know.
Amen to that. Yeah, I'd love to hear more of your story as well.
Yeah, well, I would love to stay in contact and be friends, and I'd love to keep an eye on Cassette and make sure she's gonna grow into a great young lady, and I'm sure she's in good hands. So, But yeah, no, I'd love to just keep in contact, and like I said, you need anything, just please reach out, or someone to talk to. Hell, I can even get you in contact with other mothers who have been through similar situations, including my own. So.
Oh, no, that sounds wonderful. We do, for as isolated as it has been, I've definitely gained a lot of community from this. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. Did we cover everything that we needed to? If you need to throw in something,
so.
You're more than welcome to.
Oh, no, I think we've covered pretty much anything that I can think of at the moment.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you telling your guys' story, and I mean, you're just a brave person. I'm very happy that you and her made it through, and you're both alive and thriving, however you are, and so just please keep doing what you're doing, and like I said, we'll keep in contact soon.
Thank you. I appreciate you chatting with me today.
Yeah, same here, and we'll talk soon, and take care. Okay.
All right. Bye.
All right, guys. I trying to mute the mic every time my stomach growls because I am a hungry boy. And I'm gonna go get some food. But before I do that, I just want to check in with you all. I hope all you guys and gals and goblins and ghouls, I hope you're all doing wonderful as best as you can. I had a good Thanksgiving. Yes, this is the day after Thanksgiving. I'm doing this, even though it's coming out much later. And just try to find things that you're thankful for, regardless of how small they may seem to you or others. Just please, just try to find some value in it. And Nicole's a very good example of that, because she could have died through all that, and she could have lost her daughter. She could have lost a lot. Could have lost everything, and she's here to tell her story and get past this crazy storm that she was in, and bring the positive. So I'm gonna try to be better at that myself. So I thought maybe there was something else I wanted to add, but I guess not. Of course, I would. I like to bring Bullet on the mic, but Bullet is no longer here. He's in this apartment, and he's alive. He's just, I don't know where he went. He was laying next to me, and then he started to try to cough up a hairball, and I had to mute the mic for that. And he doesn't really cough him up. I think he just gets a little hair in there, and then he goes, heh, heh. And then, after about 10 of those, he just he's good. So, so he's probably in the bedroom or something, but he is okay, and he sends his love. But, and for those who, if this is your first episode, Bullet is a cat. A very adorable cat, very loving boy. He is my co-host, and he tends to participate sometimes, including being very, very destructive by moving the mic away from my face. So it really disrupts the conversation. But he's loved and spoiled, so he can do what he wants. I am not his master. He is mine. That's kind of how it goes. Even though I've never liked that whole, I own him type of thing with an animal. I never looked at it that way. I've looked at him as just a family member, a loved one. And I mean that for any animal that is considered a pet. But anywho, I'm going on a tangent. Thank you, Nicole, for telling that great story. And I hope you all have a great day, great week, weekend, so on and so on. We will be back here again next week. And just because I don't have it recorded doesn't mean there won't be another one, because there will be, because this is so far in the future, or so far, this is so far in the past because I've done so many of these. I'm still doing this in 2022, so you can bet your dollar that I will have had a bunch more done before this one comes out. So, same time, same channel, we shall... I guess I'll dedicate this episode at the very end here just to dedicate it to my wonderful friend, Miss Johnson, who passed away recently, and I love her dearly. I'll say something in the beginning, but I appreciate her and just say rest in peace. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody. Oh, I hit the wrong button again because I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Bye, everybody. See you next week.